Well, it happened. Tom Brady retired. Finally, after 23 seasons, he called it a career, and he deserves all the praise as well for being the GOAT for now, and an obvious first ballot Hall of Famer. But after the NFC South looked like an absolute dumpster fire, being the worst division in the NFC in 2022, the division's future looks really good, with each team looking for a fresh start with their new quarterbacks. With the two veterans in Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr coming into the division, as well as the two young prospects in Desmond Ridder and the future.
With the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Carolina Panthers select Bryce Young.
So, let's talk about it. During this offseason, it was crucial for Carolina to make moves after an underperforming regular season last year while trying to juggle three quarterbacks at once, one including Baker Mayfield at the start of the season. And they certainly did, as the Panthers made a massive push to get the first overall pick as they shipped DJ Moore and some draft capital for that pick to inevitably change their franchise, as they selected quarterback Bryce Young out of Alabama, a guy who has been projected to be an elite game changer on the field, as he was a major piece to bringing Alabama to the Natty, despite the fact that they lost to Georgia in that game 33-18. Young had a good senior year, throwing for 3,328 passing yards and 32 touchdowns, though his best year would have to be in 2021 when he won SEC Offensive Player of the Year and threw for 47 touchdowns. And this was a massive move for Carolina because they haven't had a star-studded quarterback since Cam Newton when they drafted him first overall in the draft. Along with Bryce Young being drafted, the Panthers organization has helped build a high-powered offense in free agency to help Bryce during this upcoming season, bring in some protection up front with Bradley Bozeman from Baltimore and guard Justin McCray, who's played 76 games since 2017. To not only help protect Bryce, but also create some running lanes, newly acquired running back Miles Sanders from Philadelphia, as they signed Sanders to a 4-year, $25 million contract during this offseason. Miles Sanders last season had a career-high year as he rushed for over 1,200 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns, helping lead the freight train of Philly to a Super Bowl appearance. Out wide, they signed veteran wide receiver Adam Thielen from Minnesota. Coming into Carolina, they're getting a big-time playmaker who still has a few more years left to make some big catches. When last season he even proved that in Minnesota when he had 70 catches for over 700 yards and 6 touchdowns. Along with Thielen, they also signed DJ Chark coming from Detroit, trying to get to his 2019 self when he had over 1,000 yards receiving and 8 touchdowns. Defensively, Carolina signed safety Von Bell, who last year had a career high in interceptions with 4 for Cincinnati, adding to an already stacked secondary with Dante Jackson and CJ Henderson having 2 picks in 2022. And J.C. Horn, who in his second season had 3 interceptions for the Panthers. The Panthers up front on the D-line brought back defensive end Henry Anderson, who had 18 tackles in 11 games last season for the Panthers, trying to get back to his 2017 self, where he had 7 sacks for New York, which is a career high for him. Overall, the Panthers have the highest ceiling and the biggest potential with this squad for the division in the future. So towards the end of the 2022 season last year, the Atlanta Falcons finally chose to start their rookie quarterback out of the University of Cincinnati, Desmond Ridder. While only playing the last 4 games of the season, he played fairly decent, throwing for 2 touchdowns and over 700 yards and having a 2-2 record while playing. Now, having a full offseason as the new starter for Atlanta, gaining that confidence with his teammates, his coaches, and himself, Ridder could have a pretty decent season if the Falcons' offense doesn't change too much after a dominating rushing year for them. And even if that doesn't work, they did sign Taylor Heineke from the Commanders to replace him if need be. And speaking of that rushing attack, Atlanta last year was ranked 3rd in rushing as they had a 1-2 punch at the running back spot, with Tyler Algier having over 1,000 rushing yards and running back Cordell Patterson having 695 yards and 8 touchdowns. Even Marcus Mariota had almost 500 yards. So if the offense stays the same and tries to not overcomplicate things for Ridder, he should be fine, especially since they still have young talented targets like tight end Kyle Pitts, who had over 1,000 yards in his rookie season, and wide receiver Drake London, who had 866 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2022. And during this offseason, Atlanta made sure to bring back 2 of their offensive linemen back to help the offense, as left tackle Caleb McGarry signed a 3-year deal and offensive guard Chris Lindstorm signed a 5-year deal after getting a Pro Bowl nod last year. During the draft this year, they made an interesting pick as they chose running back Bijan Robinson out of Texas. Now, I'm not denying the raw talent that the unanimous All-American has, as he's coming into the season having over 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns on the ground, how he's obviously going to improve the running attack wherever he goes, but I think they possibly could have gone elsewhere like an offensive lineman or somewhere else. But they did follow that pick by selecting offensive tackle Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse in the second round to help fill that offensive line need. The Falcons mainly, though, targeted the defensive side in free agency as they brought in 2 former All-Pro players with, on the D-line, they signed defensive end Calais Campbell, who's had himself a Hall of Fame career in both Arizona and Baltimore, who can still get to the quarterback at the age of 36 as he had 5.5 sacks last season. As well as at the safety spot, they also brought in Jesse Bates coming in from Cincinnati, as he's coming in having 14 picks in the last 5 years, with having 4 last season. They also traded for a former first-round pick from Ohio State with Jeff Okudah from the Detroit Lions. Okudah's play has progressed, especially last season, as he had career highs in tackles with 73 and pass deflections with 9. All in all, the Falcons this season look to improve defensively to help out with their high-scoring offense with one of the top rushing attacks in the league. After a failed 8-9 season and a loss in the wildcard round, Tom Brady is finally gone from the NFL after 23 years of dominating the league and earning the right to be the GOAT of the NFL. And while us fans are going to miss him throwing dimes all over the field, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are definitely going to be missing him more after this upcoming season. As the quarterback room for Tampa Bay right now is Kyle Trask, who they drafted in 2021, and Baker Mayfield, as many may know, who had his run in Cleveland, then moved to Carolina, but people might not remember his last 4 starts of the season with the Rams, throwing for 850 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Though they haven't been looking too good from what the Bucs social media has been posting over this offseason. Other than losing Tom Brady, the Bucs also lost a haul of other players this offseason, including running back Leonard Fournette, who led their team last year in total scrimmage yards with near 1,200 yards, having 668 on the ground and then 523 receiving, being the 3rd best receiver on that team. They also lost their starting tight end and Cameron Brate, as well as losing guard Shaq Mason, being the leader of that offensive line. They still have that insanely good duo at the wide receiver spot with Mike Evans, who's had over 1,000 yards receiving every year in his 9-year career, and Chris Godwin, who's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons while having issues staying healthy. So their offense won't be abysmal, to say the least, in 2023. Defensively, they were able to bring back defensive captain inside linebacker Levante David to a 1-year deal. David, who's been a cornerstone piece to that organization and has had 29 sacks and 12 picks in 11 seasons. Along with Levante David, they still have a young stud after signing the 5th-year option for Devin White, who last year still put up top-tier tackling numbers while improving his coverage game with 5 pass deflections, which is a career high, as well as getting 5.5 sacks, which has had since his 2nd year in the league. Also, they brought back defensive back Jamil Dean, while also losing cornerback Sean Murphy-Bunting and safety Mike Edwards, who all led their D in picks last season. Though they still have a monster D-line, as Vita Vea is still probably one, if not the best run defender in the NFC, as well as outside linebacker Shaq Barrett, who just in 2021 had 10 sacks, but also just in 2019, he had 19.5 sacks and was a menace to any offense. This offseason, New Orleans needed to address the quarterback situation, as Jameis Winston last year wasn't nearly as good as they hoped for, to then start the Red Rifle Andy Dalton for the rest of the season to have his 7-10 record. So, they upgraded on a few pieces as the Saints added running back Jamal Williams from Detroit, led their team last year in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns with 17 total. New Orleans also added their new quarterback for the next 2 years as they signed Derek Carr from the Raiders, while the Saints try to regain some of their success that they had when Drew Brees was there. Derek, during his time in Oakland and Las Vegas with the Raiders, always seemed like the middle of the pack quarterback when talking about the top ones throughout the league. Last season, he threw for over 3,500 passing yards and 24 touchdowns with 14 interceptions, which was a down year compared to his previous year as he threw for 4,800 yards and 23 touchdowns. Also including the fact that Derek Carr has only made the playoffs one time in his whole 9-year career. It may be rough, but he still has a pretty good offense to work with, as the Saints still have a good offensive line as well out wide, as they still have former All-Pro wide receiver Michael Thomas coming back after having an ankle injury that sidelined him for a season. Last year, he came back for 3 games and had 170 yards and 3 touchdowns while playing, showing that he can still ball out even after a year off. On the other side of him too, you still have Chris Olave, who New Orleans drafted with the 11th pick out of Ohio State last season. During his rookie year, he had 72 catches for 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns. They also may still have Alvin Kamara for this upcoming season, as we still don't know what awaits the league after the news this week when Alvin Kamara pleaded a no contest for his upcoming trial, meaning he does some community work and pays for the victim's medical bills after Kamara and others were allegedly being charged with battery charges. At this point, we're waiting for the league to make their decision on the matter of how long he'll be suspended, which is why they'd sign a guy like Jamal Williams, as he plays a very physical yet elusive game, as he scored 17 touchdowns the previous season, mainly close to the goal line. Defensively, New Orleans lost everyone on the D-line except for All-Pro Cam Jordan, as defensive end Marcus Davenport signed to Minnesota, defensive tackle David Onyemata signed to Atlanta, and defensive tackle Shai Tuttle signed over to the Carolina Panthers. And they hopefully fix those holes on the roster, as in the first 2 rounds of the Saints went to the D-line as they drafted defensive tackle Brian Breezy from Clemson, having 3.5 sacks his senior year, and defensive end Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame having 11 sacks back-to-back seasons in 2021 and 2022. So hopefully they have some success to help the rest of the vets on the D, like Demario Davis, Marlon Humphrey, and Honey Badger Tyrann Mathieu. Overall, this NFC South division may not look like a contender this year, but within the next few seasons, we're gonna need to pay attention to them. With that being said, let's rank them. Starting with 4th place, we're gonna go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. With a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback running the offense, I don't see them having as much success with Baker as they did with Tom, meaning they won't make the playoffs, and there's a possibility of them struggling with a 5-6 win season. Then, with 3rd place, I'll take the Carolina Panthers, as Bryce Young hopefully is going to be the game changer that he was in Alabama. I'm not expecting them to make it to the playoffs this season, but they could definitely do something. With the additions of Miles Sanders and the receivers they also picked up, they could possibly have 7 wins, maybe more. Soaring into 2nd place, we have the Atlanta Falcons because of the haul of defensive players they brought in during free agency and doing well in the draft and surrounding a decent team around Desmond Ridder. The Falcons are definitely a top contender for the NFC South division title and will win 9 games. Which means in 1st place in 2023, I pick the New Orleans Saints, winning 9 to 10 games, as it might be a bumpy road initially for Derek Carr. But he has the most experience in this division, has had the most success, and is quite frankly the best quarterback in that South division, as we haven't seen what Bryce Young can do yet in the NFL. Alright, and that's going to conclude another NFL division this week. I apologize for not uploading the past couple of weeks. I've just been super busy with summer break, as I have about another month left before I start school again. But thank you for all the support the last couple of videos as we switched up content, moving from the XFL to the NFL. And I hope y'all are as excited as I am. And I hope you enjoyed today's video, because if you did, please smash that like and subscribe buttons and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, have a good one.